Men have been fighting underground for centuries. Before gunpowder was even invented, soldiers sneaked into castles through secret tunnels. Spies used them for getting in and out of fortified camps. The ancient Romans used tunnels, the Mongols used them. Ivan the Terrible used tunnels to dig under the walls of the city of Kazan and bring it down. So the tunnels under Gaza are not a new military challenge, but they remain one of the world's most difficult. It's actually difficult to believe that with all the modern technology and inventions that go into powering our 21st century war machine, something as ancient and simple as a tunnel could still pose such a big challenge to the world's most advanced armies. In 2001, Osama bin Laden outlasted a relentless US bombing campaign by holing up in the tunnels and caves of Tora Bora. Even 15,000-pound bombs and 100 airstrikes in a day failed to break through. Let's look at the First World War. Armies on both sides were digging and counter-digging. Switzerland, for example, built an entire series of military fortresses under the Swiss Alps. But the West also realized that regular soldiers could not fight at their best inside tunnels. In 1914, the British Army started getting in miners and training them for military tasks. Britain created special Bantam troops. These were soldiers who were shorter and thinner than average. In fact, smaller size was one natural advantage that Asian armies had when they faced Western invaders. Invaders who were bigger in size, strength, and number. Tunnels became almost a symbol of resistance against a stronger enemy. Japan used tunnels extensively to defend Pacific Islands against Allied invasion. Years later, the Viet Cong, fighting the US in Vietnam, used tunnels to evade their enemies and launch surprise attacks, and these were extremely effective attacks. They cost the US heavily, despite the fact that America had its own underground warfare specialists in Vietnam. They were known as the Tunnel Rats. But the Tunnel Rats were up against a vast underground network and an enemy that was agile, inventive, and determined. The Viet Cong's network of tunnels was incredibly sophisticated. They had armories, hospitals, mess halls, manufacturing centers, and storage facilities all underground. And there were different varieties: squad-sized tunnels, which were generally less than 6 feet deep and 100 feet long. There were company-sized tunnels, which were wider, but did not have too many compartments. And then there were battalion-sized tunnels, which could be as deep as 50 feet underground and sometimes had up to 4 different levels. Many key connecting parts of these tunnels were as narrow as possible. The walls were angled. It was almost impossible for an American soldier to fit through many of these tunnels, and they were extensively booby-trapped. They were hard to spot from outside. They had camouflaged air shafts, disguised entrances, almost impregnable. Even the B-52 bombs that the Americans dropped could not destroy many of the Viet Cong tunnels. And all of this 60 years ago. So it's not difficult to imagine the level of sophistication that may exist in the tunnels beneath Gaza. The tunnels under Gaza were built before Hamas had even formed, and they were built by smugglers who used them since the 1980s for smuggling goods under the Egypt border. Most of the earth in Gaza is rich in clay except near the coast, which means that it's easy to dig through and does not need complex supports. Now, over time, the Palestinians realized that the tunnels could have a military use, and they extended the underground network. Hamas expanded and utilized the tunnel system that they inherited with an eye to strategy. And since they were operating beneath territory that they controlled, they didn't have to worry about noise or vibrations alerting their enemy. So the tunnels expanded quickly. So much so that when Israel attacked Gaza in 2014, the IDF was stunned at the extent of the tunnels, which was reported at the time to have surpassed 100 kilometers. Israel began setting up specialized units for underground warfare fairly early, starting with the combat engineers known as Yahalom. Set up in the 90s, this unit was almost doubled in size after the 2014 Gaza war. That's when Israel really came face to face with the complex challenge of the modern Hamas tunnels. Now, Israel has a commando unit called Samur, or the Weasels. They're tunnel warfare specialists, trained in undercover assault techniques, leading the IDF when they enter the Gaza tunnels. Now, the first thing to crack for Israel are the entrances to the tunnels. These could be in the tens of thousands in Gaza. Most of them are hidden. They're inside homes, garages, shops, warehouses, under rubbish dumps, and now probably under heaps of rubble. Now, what Israel has been doing is using drones for 24/7 surveillance. They're using advanced software to analyze movement patterns, and they're also using human intelligence from informers on the ground to build up a map of these crucial entrances. They don't know it all, but they're hoping that they know enough. Most of the Gaza tunnels have several entrances at each end, so that if even some are discovered and blocked, others will stay usable. Underground, the tunnels are all interconnected so that even if one entire section is blocked off, that may not make a big impact. It's this interconnected underground web that Israel needs to map. Underground, where GPS doesn't work, satellite signals cannot reach. Israel will have to fall back on magnetic sensors and crude movement trackers. Plus, they can't use lights because that would give away their presence. So night vision goggles are crucial. And the US has been shipping hundreds of these to Israel, preparing for just this: battle underground in the darkness. Israel's underground units won't have radio communication with the surface. So again, they may have to rely on old school methods, like field telephones. That's technology from over 100 years ago. Israel soldiers will have to stop at every junction of the tunnel to map their positions, secure the area, and leave some troops to defend against counterattacks. Every time they find a shaft, they'll need to figure out if the area above is controlled by Hamas or has been taken by Israel, because an attack could come from above at any moment. Now imagine repeating this 50 times, 100 times. Yes, Israel has drones and robots, but their movement is limited and signals underground may not be effective. And then there will be the obstacles underground: booby traps, IEDs, smoke bombs to suffocate intruders, may be triggered by motion sensors or light sensors. Hamas has had years to set up hidden cameras underground, detection devices to alert them of intruders, and wires and cables that may trigger explosions if they're cut. This means the entire section of the tunnel could collapse with one wrong move, trapping Israel's forces. It's not only Hamas who may use toxic gases underground. Israel might also use chemical agents such as tear gas. Then, there's the option of using water to flood the tunnels. It's been used in the past. Egypt, for example, poured sewage water into the smugglers' tunnels going into Gaza from its side of the border. But this is such a huge tunnel complex that some experts have said there's simply not enough water in Gaza. There's been a lot of buzz about Israel's sponge bomb, a device that creates rapidly expanding foam when triggered, which hardens to form a kind of plug that will block a tunnel. But the chemicals in this sponge bomb are dangerous ones, and there have been reports of Israeli soldiers blinded after mishandling the bomb. The simplest solution to many people may simply seem to be blowing up the tunnels. But such a massive engineering feat during an active war is next to impossible. The whole of Gaza may quite simply collapse. First, there's the question of size. There's no room underground to maneuver machine guns and rifles. Then there's the darkness. The flash after firing an ordinary pistol will leave Israeli troops temporarily blind, especially if they're using night vision goggles. Then there's the question of space. Standing in a tunnel, only one person can fire at a time. At most, two, if one person kneels and the other person stands. You're likely to be so close to the enemy that using something like a grenade could harm your own side as well. The most likely option for the Israelis will be the smaller caliber weapons with sound suppressors that will prevent muzzle flashes. Again, they'll be falling back on age-old weapons like knives, tried and tested over generations in hand-to-hand combat. In this arena, every step could mean death.